Hi, I'm Jo Clark, and thanks so much for joining me today. This is the Redefining Midlife podcast, a podcast designed for the 40-plus woman who is determined to challenge society's myths and beliefs around midlife. It's for the woman who is inspired and ready to define midlife her way. Join me each week as I chat to health and wellness experts for up-to-date information on how to live well, as well as some special conversations with incredible everyday women redefining what midlife can look like. Here's to making our next half of life even better than the first. Today's guest is Megan Martin. Megan is a university qualified nutritionist who's passionate about supporting women during the menopausal transition. In this episode, we chat about how our daily choices can have a huge influence on the way we experience this time of life. Now, as teenagers and young women, we grew up in the years of the fad diet culture. Stick-thin supermodels as the ideal body type and counting calories were the norm. Those were the days. But unfortunately, this has left behind unseen physical and psychological damage for many of us. In Megan's work, there's a strong focus on health, and she uses the non-diet approach to help her clients achieve the best health outcomes in midlife and beyond. Megan helps women to future-proof their health and minimise symptoms using the lifestyle medicine principles. In fact, Megan recently presented a masterclass to the ladies in my Better Than Before online membership. Now, through sharing this type of information, we can support our bodies more mindfully during the transition years. So, enjoy the episode. Welcome to the podcast, Megan. It's wonderful to have you here, and I'm really looking forward to talking about all things nutrition with you today.
Thank you, Jo. I'm very happy to be here.
Excellent. So you are a nutritionist and you work specifically with women in the menopausal transition years. And that can go for women anywhere from their late 30s all the way through to their late 50s and even beyond that. But for those of us who don't know, could you actually explain to us what a nutritionist is and what does a nutritionist do?
So a nutritionist is probably first up, I want to highlight the difference between a nutritionist and a dietitian, because I think there's a lot of confusion around what they specifically do. And then I want to talk about nutritionists alone as well. So a dietitian will work in clinical settings, so mainly in hospitals and medical centres, and people that are not well usually, like it's helping people that are have conditions of some sort. So a nutritionist is mainly preventative health. Like, it's not part of my scope of practice to really work with people that are sick. So in menopause is a natural transition of life. It is not an illness. And yes, we are at risk of some chronic diseases, but I work in the prevention of those happening and educating women around that. To highlight just nutritionist itself as well, just for your listeners, the term nutritionist in Australia is not protected. So anybody could call themselves a nutritionist, which is really frustrating for those of us, such as myself, that are university qualified, because there are some that have done like 6-week courses and they can call themselves nutritionists as well. So I really want to highlight to your listeners to look for qualifications and really get some information from where they're getting their nutrition advice from, and lifestyle advice, because it's not just nutrition, it's also lifestyle as well. So yeah, we generally talk about food, I suppose, but for me personally, I feel it's not just what we're eating, it's everything in our life that contributes to why we eat the foods we eat, what's accessible to us, so the environment that we're in. In my business, I work with pillars of self-care that also look at physical activity. Physical activity and nutrition pretty much go hand in hand anyway. Like, we learnt a lot about that at uni together. But not so much sleep and stress, which are really important as well, because we know, like, if we're tired, we tend to go for the sugary, processed, quick hit sort of food. And with stress, like, it could go either way. You could not eat at all, or you could, just binge eat. Like, I look at nutrition, but I also look at stress reduction, sleep strategies, joyful movement, and connection to self and others. And I think the connection really encompasses it all together, because each of those pillars do impact on each other. But different nutritionists might work in different areas. So we all have our sort of specialties that we like to work in, and others may not look at those types of lifestyle factors. Others may just do food plans and menu plans and things like that for people, where I actually don't do that. I like to keep it as simple as I can and teach them with the recipes that they already love, or learn how to find the recipes that they love, and then we can make tweaks to it, and they just have a basic framework on how to put a healthy plate together, basically. I don't like to make it too complicated. I think there's enough confusion and complication going on already with menopause. So let's just,
keep it simple.
Keep it simple and move out of the dieting,
Yeah.
phase, because,
Yes.
Our age group, we're being very exposed to diet culture.
Absolutely. And that was the next thing I was going to ask you then, because for women who are in their 40s and 50s, and even women who were older than that, we grew up with such a diet culture. And when we were young women, it was the Atkins diet, the Pritikin diet, the grapefruit diet, the Beverly Hills diet, liquid diets. Like there was just, and then you had the different models, supermodels came into the scene there as well. So as young women and growing up, teenagers and into our early 20s, it was just a bombardment of these messages of food, and food being almost seen as the key to your success in life. And it was restriction. And so for many of us, it was, it's a difficult mindset to get over. And then we had that era of low fat foods, and low fat was seen as the devil. And then we were given a whole lot of extra processed foods that really weren't foods at all. And it included a lot of sugar and a lot of things that were full of refined ingredients in there. So what has that done for women who are of our age on a physiological and also a psychological level? Because it's done probably damage in both of those areas.
Yeah, I think physically, we know that if we are dieting and we have a lot of weight loss, we know diets are not sustainable. So then, it does affect our metabolism, because we're having this massive loss, and then the body goes into starvation mode. And so then it starts to hold on to things. So then you put on the weight, and then it makes it harder again to lose the weight again. So that part of it physiologically is really difficult. And I think psychologically, I definitely see it, particularly with people that connect with me that are wanting to work with me. But when I tell them I don't do diets and I don't do menu plans, I don't give recipes, all that sort of thing, they're looking just for weight loss, and that's what they're looking for. Like, it's still, I think, as much as we're trying really hard to minimize that as much as we can, but I do think there's still quite a bit of it out there. There's still a lot of women that are still maybe not realizing that they're doing it, and it's just all they've ever known. So they're just still looking for that. And our body changes. We have this weight gain around the middle at menopause, and it's distressing. A lot of women really, like, I would have to say, if it's not hot flushes and night sweats, it's the weight gain. It's the biggest thing that I hear about. But I always say we really need to try to embrace the changes and accept it, and be kind to ourselves, and not internally fight with ourselves, because then that makes it even harder to achieve the results that you're looking for. And make it a health focus rather than a weight focus. Don't look at metrics. Don't weigh yourself. If you're going to look at measurements, probably the most important one would be your waist to hip circumference, because that would give you an idea of your visceral fat. And it is really hard. I've had women connect with me that wanted me to count different macros for them, and all that sort of thing. And I've just got, look, I'm not, the amount of work.
I remember getting the little book when I was younger. You'd have your calorie counter book, and you'd look up all the different foods, and it was just it's quite when you think about it, quite a sick way to look as food, as whether it's going to be good, bad, evil, punishment or not. Will I eat now? Can I eat that? And I suppose years or decades of that sort of mindset, it's not going to switch overnight.
No, it's not. And it does take time. But I'm hoping, I know for myself, because, I was a teenager in the 80s. I dieted. I remember going to the chemist and buying cellulite cream, and doing all those sorts of things when I was.
Oh, if I only had the cellulite of an 18-year-old now.
Yeah, like when I was, my body was changing, and I was putting on a little bit of weight, and my hips got a bit.
You were becoming a woman, is basically what you were
Things
becoming from a child.
Changing. That's right. And I remember not being happy with my body at that. That's really what it is. It's just this dissatisfaction, and it just takes up so much mental space.
Absolutely.
That we don't need to be thinking about. Like, we want to be enjoying our lives. We want to be able to trust our bodies. I was thinking about this the other day, actually, because I use some of the principles from the non-diet approach, which is being in tune with and trusting your body and the decisions that you make, and not having any judgment around the types of food that you're choosing. I say to all my women, all types of food are okay to have in your diet. It's just what the balance is of the most nourishing ones compared to the ones that aren't so nourishing. I don't label foods good and bad or healthy or unhealthy, because it's our bodies that are unhealthy or healthy. But yeah, when babies, for instance, when we're born, we're very in tune with our hunger and satiety cues. And you learn this sort of I've done an introductory course with the non-diet approach, and they sort of talk about this a little bit, how babies know, like when they've had enough, they just push the bottle away, or they just push the spoon away, even when they're starting solids, even through their toddler, kinder years. Like, kids really know when they've had enough to eat. We tend to lose that when we're a little bit older, or we become a little bit more selective around the types of foods we're going to eat. We do tend to become very judgmental around the types of foods that we're choosing. And I think that's got a lot to do with society, advertising, and what's accessible to us.
Yeah.
So, and as you said, like with the calorie counting book, I remember having one of those as well when I was a teenager, and it just becomes so taxing on your time. Even with my clients, I only ask for a 3-day food diary. I've never done like a 1 week, write down everything, measure everything. Like, that sort of thing is applicable for research, but it's not really applicable for your day to day. Like, you really need to learn how to choose foods to eat without having to be so analytical and actually be writing things down,
And it's so triggering for many women as well, in a harmful way. So I am aware that there may be women who have got issues from the past or even present, where there might be some sort of eating disorders part of history because of various influences. So for some women, it can be extremely, extremely triggering.
That's right.
For me personally, and for the Women in My Better Than Before membership that I have, we talk about, and you cover that as well, about this wellness pillar being nutrition. So that's what I call it within my membership, and how we can use food in order to help us live a better life. Our food choices can certainly influence our health and our wellness overall. So being mindful about the types of foods that are going to nourish my body, being mindful when I go shopping, what sort of foods are going to be good to be putting in my basket, how I can plan meals, thinking about what sort of foods I can use to nourish my body as well. And also being that a whole awareness of what my body responds well to. So some foods may make me bloat, or my body doesn't like it. So it's being more in tune with that. And I think as I've become older, I've been able to do that more and more. And so you came and gave a really great masterclass actually in the membership recently, which was wonderful. So we had you talking about these sort of things, because as you said earlier as well, there's no shortage of information about food.
No.
It's everywhere. And that affects the food choices we have, does affect our bodies. So what should women in this phase of life that we're in now, what do you, as a general, obviously it's going to be individual to a large extent, but what sort of general information would you probably suggest to the listeners today with regards to their food choices?
Well, in regard to diet, Mediterranean diet is definitely the diet that's been the most researched. Any research that you read, in particular in regard to menopause, that is the recommended diet. It's anti-inflammatory. So, when our estrogen levels start to drop, it causes more inflammation in the body because estrogen is anti-inflammatory. And the Mediterranean diet is like the oil of choice is extra virgin olive oil, which has antioxidants, it's anti-inflammatory, it's polyunsaturated oil. Mediterranean diet also minimizes unsaturated fats and trans fats, which you'd get from animal meats and salamis, things like that, and processed foods. If you look at the pyramid, they all sort of sit at the top as the things that you would have less of, and it's mainly a plant-based diet. So when you're looking at like plant-based, including legumes and your whole grains and a little bit of dairy, fish and seafood also for the Mediterranean diet. When it comes to shopping and you're looking at food choices, I'm sure plenty of people have heard this before, but stick to the outside of the supermarket. So always start at the fruit and veg section, and then just make your way around the outside, because you'll get all the fresh meat, you'll get the breads, you'll get the dairy, olives and olive oil. So go for the freshest whole foods first, and then go up and down the aisles to select what you need. In regard to specific nutrients, perimenopause, I would say definitely get your iron checked, particularly if you are suffering from really heavy periods and fluctuating periods. I mean, I know some women that have had periods that last weeks and weeks and weeks, and some women get flooding and all that sort of thing. So definitely in perimenopause, the iron losses could be significant.
Don't just guess that
don't guess,
or you may not be, just to get
it. Yeah, exactly. Definitely get a blood test and then talk to your doctor about what the next step is. Is it supplements that you need? Is it an infusion that you need even? But there is no harm in increasing dietary iron. So I always go with a first approach. But you've got heme iron rich foods and you've got non-heme iron rich foods. You want to be increasing your meat, chicken and fish for your heme iron, and non-heme iron is your plant-based iron, which is like your green leafy veg like broccoli, kale, spinach, some citrus fruits also, and have those with vitamin C. So if you say, for instance, if you're making a salad, add lemon juice to your oil, and that'll help the absorption of the iron. Yeah, so definitely iron for perimenopause. For both peri and post, phytoestrogens, which are plant-based estrogens, so they're very similar in their molecular structure, I suppose, to what our natural estrogen is like. But there is a caveat with this, is that the research has shown that only 1 in 3 women will actually benefit from taking phytoestrogens, because you need a certain type of gut bacteria that will convert it to a more potent form called equol, and then that's a more potent form of the phytoestrogen that then your receptors will connect to in your body. So I always go back to the fact that only 7% of the population eat the recommended 5 serves of vegetables per day. And if we were all to do that, we might find that our gut health would actually be a lot better, because particularly lots of colourful fruits and vegetables throughout the week are food for our gut bacteria, and that introduces more species into your gut microbiome. So if we were eating more fruits and vegetables, those foods rich in phytoestrogens, which are in particular soy and legumes, but soy mainly, you might get benefit from it. But it's a little bit iffy. It may or may not work from a diet approach. With the soy, though, I do want to say, particularly with soy milk, always look for whole soybeans as the first ingredient on a soy milk pack. When you look at the ingredients list, avoid soy isolate, because it doesn't have the same effect. Yeah, I think phytoestrogens could be beneficial across peri and postmenopause, because some women do have symptoms across both stages.
Yeah.
Vitamin D also is really important for our bone health and many other things as well in our bodies. I would say also for peri and postmenopause for that, but we don't get a lot of it from food. As most people would know, a lot of it is from the sunlight. During summer, you probably are okay. It is a fat-soluble vitamin, so it means our body stores it in our fat. So we can get a blood test for that. And I would be recommending that around maybe a month into winter, see what your vitamin D levels are like, and then if needed, start taking a supplement. If you're not spending a lot of time outside in the sun, you don't need a lot of time. It's not like no sunscreen, but hands and like arms and sort of maybe chest and face exposed to the sun for like 10 minutes before that UV is really high for the day.
So early morning is a great time anyway, because it's going to reset your circadian rhythm and get you. Yeah. So that's
killing one bird with 2 stones almost.
That's right.
So you can have too much of good thing, and we don't want to get to toxicity levels. So it's good. You can have a blood test to have it checked. The other thing I really want to talk about too was calcium, because we talked about that in the masterclass. Dietary calcium. I've done a lot of work in bone health because I myself have osteopenia, and a couple of years ago, World Menopause Month was about bone health. That particular year that I found out I had bone loss because I entered early menopause, and my mum has osteoporosis. So, the 2 of the 3 risk factors. I'm not over 70 yet, but, I've got 2 of the risk factors. And the best way to find out where your bone health is sitting is to have a DEXA scan. And a lot of doctors don't talk about it. They don't really offer it You do have to pay for it usually. I know for me personally, I didn't because I went through early menopause, but just ask about it. And I did it because, not because I was worried about it, actually. I just went and got one because I just wanted to know what my baseline was. I was
Oh,
quite
okay.
shocked. I was actually
Yeah.
really shocked to find out that I had osteopenia. I didn't expect it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, see, I had mine. I was also osteopenic. My mum had severe osteoporosis, my two sisters osteoporosis. And for myself, because I've been on long-term thyroid medication for years, my doctor just automatically suggested that I go because using thyroxine long-term can cause problem with your bone health as well. So that's another thing to keep aware. So if any ladies are, I didn't go through any, I'm still perimenopausal, but that for me, that was a risk factor, family, and also being on long-term thyroid medication. So yeah, I thankfully found out that I had osteopenia as well through this scan, because physically on the outside, you look fine. You can't see the cellular changes. And that's why these sorts of tests are so important.
Yeah, exactly. And this is why I like to talk about it. I'm really big on helping women become advocates for their own health, because something like bone health is something that is very silent. And if we don't address it and make it known to women now that it is something we need to think about now in our 40s.
Yep. And you can make a difference just by change. Like for me, putting things in place, I was able to reverse that, which is great. The last scan showed that my bone health had improved to the point where I was no longer within that range of being diagnosed as having osteopenia. So for me, that was a big win. So with lifestyle factors, improve and adding things in without medications, you can change. And like you said, you just start to learn about it.
That's right. Knowledge is power. And
Yeah.
you don't want to be a 70 or 80-year-old who ends up with a hip fracture
No.
and
Well, I
find
saw
out
my
then you've
mum
got
with those.
osteoporosis. It's just too late. And that,
Yeah.
unfortunately, is what commonly happens.
Yep.
Particularly for the women that are 30 odd years older than us right now. That's what's happening for them. So we can make changes for ourselves now so that we're not experiencing that. The thing that I really wanted to talk about, though, was dietary calcium as opposed to calcium supplements. With the research that I have done, it seems that the body can only process about 500 milligrams of calcium at a time, and that includes dietary or supplemental. I go with a food first approach, and yes, dairy is the most abundant form of calcium, but you can get calcium from, like bony fish and some nuts and seeds, and I think broccoli is quite high. Like I've got a whole list of different types of foods. That soy is even a little bit high in calcium, but the way the body processes dietary calcium is different to how it processes supplemental calcium. So if you eat dietary calcium, the calcium is actually going to go to your bones. Because what happens is when we reach menopause with the estrogen decline, estrogen is quite involved in the bone remodeling cycle. So the breakdown and the build-up of bone. And what actually happens before menopause is that the build, bone up and breakdown is fairly level, like it stays fairly balanced. 99% of our calcium is in our bones, 1% is in our blood for all these biochemical reactions that occur in our body. And that's really tightly regulated, the blood calcium level. But if it does vary a little bit, the body will take calcium from the bones to keep the blood calcium at 1%. It's got to always very, very tightly regulated. What happens when we take supplemental calcium, though, is that, and this is not just taking one tablet. I mean, obviously, it's taking it consistently over a long period of time. It's processed differently or metabolized differently. So the calcium can deposit itself in the soft tissues of the body. It can be deposited anywhere. And because we're also at risk of heart disease or cardiovascular disease, it can deposit in arteries and cause stiffening of arteries, calcification and things like that as well. So it's just something to be really mindful of. Yeah, I would be suggesting maybe that you do need to sort of be keeping an eye on maybe journaling or writing down what you're having, so you are keeping tabs of how much calcium you're getting. Up to 50 years old, it's 1,000 milligrams a day for women. And after 51 to 70, it's 1,300 milligrams a day. But if you're osteopenic, like I was diagnosed with osteopenia, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, I'm 51 now, so I would have been in my late 40s. So 1,300 milligrams for me straight up, because, there's already bone loss that's happened. So I'd be suggesting look at dietary first, and then if you are taking supplements, you would be wanting to stagger them throughout the day, but only do it as a top up. So at the very most, probably, hopefully, only one 500 milligram tablet a day. That would just take you up to that 1300 or just over.
Yeah.
But if we can get it all from our diet, that's even better.
That's right. Yeah.
But always take vitamin D, because vitamin D helps the calcium be absorbed.
Absorption. Yeah.
Always. So, and the other main thing I wanted to talk about was alcohol. In the Mediterranean diet, red wine is often enjoyed with meals. Red wine does have, and grapes, the skin of grapes have also a phytoestrogen called resveratrol,
yeah.
Which is actually, you need so much of that the only real way to take that is in a supplemental form. And there's still a lot of new research around that anyway on that. But I think you need to be very in tune with your symptoms. Alcohol definitely increases hot flushes and night sweats. It can make our symptoms and sleep. Like, there's this misconception about alcohol makes us sleep better, but it actually doesn't. It
No.
the sleep cycle, and we don't sleep well. And in fact, Australian guidelines for alcohol do state that no level of alcohol is safe. It is not. It is actually toxic for our bodies. But however, we do like to be social and we do like to have a drink here and there. But I would be asking women to really think about alcohol consumption. How often are you having it? Have a few nights where you're not having it and start comparing how you feel. How is your sleep when you don't have it? What are your symptoms like after you haven't had it? And really work on having less if you can. Less is best.
We had actually a guest, Sarah Conley, fairly early on when the podcast was released, and she is a grey area alcohol coach. And that was one of the big take-home messages, definitely. And she actually came to speak in the membership as well with the ladies, which was really good.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah,
Our relationship with alcohol, and again, I think growing up in the 80s and 90s, it was a different culture. The numbers these days are showing that the children of the younger children aren't drinking anywhere near as the amount that we did. In fact, our age group is right up there as the, and it does. Like my relationship with alcohol has changed over the last 5 to 10 years for sure.
Yeah,
it's not good for your bone health. That's another thing. It's not.
No,
correlations. Overall, it's great to have. Well, for me personally, I still enjoy a drink or two or three every now and then, but it's certainly not an everyday thing, that's for sure.
No, you definitely don't want to be drinking alcohol every day. I really think for menopause, if you can just eliminate that red wine out altogether, that would be better, because we're at risk of bone, brain and heart health, chronic diseases, and metabolic syndrome. So we know that alcohol and cancer, alcohol contributes.
So rethink that drink is basically.
Yeah, exactly.
So Megan, if people want to talk and find out more information and chat with you, how can they? Again, I'll have all of these details. I'll pop in the show notes. But just as people are listening, how can they make contact with you if they want to find out more information about what you do and how you can help?
Yeah, my website is healthybalancenutrition.com.au. On Instagram, it's healthybalance_nutrition. You could send me a DM there. I'm also on Facebook as well. And any of those three places, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to change gears now, and just a couple of questions about not so much talking about nutrition per se, but more about you as a midlife woman, given this is a Redefining Midlife podcast. Now, I know you had a recent career change.
Yeah.
And that can be scary. Like for me, it was one of those things where you've been in what you're doing for a long time, and then all of a sudden you get unsettled, and that feeling bubbles that you need to do something different, and it's scary.
Yeah.
But it's doable. It's doable, isn't it? We were talking before the podcast. It's just making that decision, and then taking that one tentative step after the next, after the next. So tell us a bit about your career change of late.
Yeah. Okay. So there is a bit of a story here, and I think it goes for probably most of my life. So I've always had an interest in science. I remember from a very, very young age, like 7, 8. I grew up in the country. I used to help my dad in the yard. I used to I was just always curious about nature and in awe of it all, really. When I was about 7 or 8, I asked my mum and dad for a microscope. And they brought me a toy microscope, but it did magnify, you could see things under it. And I remember looking at blades of grass and leaves and a strand of hair and flies' wings. Like, I was just really interested. Our neighbour next door had lots of rocks in his garden, and I used to go there and he'd let me go in with a bucket of water and I'd wash the rocks and I'd look at all the colours. And I just always had this real curiosity around just nature. And then probably when I hit high school, I remember it got to year 11 and it was sort of thinking about what subjects was I going to pick for year 12. But I had to really think about what do I want to, like, really, what do I want to do? And I remember going to the CES. I don't know whether you remember the Commonwealth Employment Service.
Yes, yeah.
Office,
Haven't heard that for a while.
They had all these pamphlets and I was looking at all these job careers, that you could do. And I picked up dietitian. And I suppose I'd already gone through this whole dieting thing and the cellulite cream and, all the counting calories and all this sort of stuff. So I'd already had a bit of an interest in health and the human body and how it worked. And I've always been in awe of that because I don't think anything can replicate what our bodies actually naturally do. Science and medicine is wonderful. Health is very fascinating to me. So I was reading about, dietetics, and I was like, oh yeah, my heart and my gut was just fluttering. It was like, yeah, that's it. That's it. So I did year 12 with the intention of going into dietetics, go to uni. I got in and all the rest of it. I didn't end up going for a few reasons. I ended up working in an office for quite a few years in accounts and things like that. And I just wasn't happy really. And I was just still had this yearning of wanting to go to uni and do this course. So in the meantime, I've met my boyfriend at the time, who's my husband now. And I was 25 when I first started at uni. And I did a Bachelor of Science with doing biochemistry and physiology, which is what I needed to get into dietetics. I got married at the end of that year. And when I finished the course, I was 6 months pregnant and I was going to go on to do the Masters of Dietetics. I got in and everything, but I had a pretty traumatizing birth and I wasn't very well. And I just realized I couldn't do this with all, I couldn't take my baby to So yeah, I ended up not doing it. And then I really did think that the door had closed on that, to be honest. And I was a stay-at-home mum for the next couple of years after that. Like, I had a second child, and then I started thinking about, what am I going to do with this science degree, really? All right, dietetics or nutrition is not going to happen, but what else can I do with this science degree? I thought, I'm going to go to TAFE. So I went and did a lab tech course, which I never finished, but I got enough experience to get myself a job in a hospital lab. Mm-hmm. I worked in pathology, but not blood. When most people think of pathology, they think of blood, but I worked in anatomical pathology, which was surgical specimens. So anybody that had surgery and had anything removed from their body, it came to our lab. Mm-hmm. And I loved it because I was learning even more about the human body, what was going on inside the body. I was learning about the pathology, and it was a really good learning environment. The problem was that the industry was starting to change. The hospital I was working in had privatised the service, and those learning opportunities had then started to decrease a little bit, and it really just wasn't enjoyable anymore. So I left that hospital and I worked in another hospital full time for a little while, and that didn't work out for me because it was in the city. My kids were still in primary school, and I was pretty miserable because I wasn't coping. I just wasn't seeing my kids, and I was really rethinking, what am I doing? Like, really, like, I'm getting home at 7:30 at night and I'm not even seeing them. My husband's already fed them. I'm not reading them a book anymore. And we're up again at 5 a.m. to be back at the school drop-off before school care at 6:30 in the morning to get to the train. And, it was just, the whole process for me was just really, really stressful. So I only stayed there for 6 months and then I decided I was going to leave. I ended up having 4 months to really think about what I wanted to do. And nutrition came back to me. And I really thought that it was possible then, and I could maybe do a nutrition course. So, but then I was also looking at jobs, and I also applied for a postgraduate degree at uni in nutrition as well, which I got into. But at the same time, I also got a job as a lab tech in a school. And so I thought, I'll just concentrate on the school job for now, and I will leave the nutrition aside. And so that's what I did. And I was in that job for a year, and I already knew I will not do this the rest of my life. I just knew. It wasn't, it was a great job, but it didn't light me up. So, yeah, the following year, that was summer of 2014, I decided to apply for a different nutrition course. It was a master's in human nutrition at Deakin Uni. So I did that part-time while I worked for the next 5 years or so. I graduated from that, start of 2019, and I thought that I would get a job as a nutritionist somewhere, but there's no jobs, Joe. There's no jobs for nutritionists anyway. Lots for dietitians because I work in hospitals, but none for nutritionists. So the next step was really to start my own business. And then it was like, well, what am I going to do? And around the same time, or probably towards the end of the degree, I was starting to go through menopause myself. And I wasn't coping. I had all of the symptoms, and I was really struggling with getting support and guidance and any information. And it really was just a no-brainer for me that this was going to be the area that I was going to work in. So 2019, I pretty much spent just looking at how I was going to work, trying to understand menopause, sharing this information, and all that sort of thing. So I ended up, I was still working in the school at that time, but I'd been working 50-hour weeks between the school job and working in my business as well. And it was just starting to become a little bit overwhelming. I was starting to realize that, my energy levels just aren't where they used to be. My husband also changed his job in all that time. So that was having an impact on me as well. So I really came down to asking myself the question of, what do I want to do? I'm now 50 years old, and if I don't make the plunge now, I'm probably never going to do it. So, for a long time, I sort of accepted I could probably do both, but then I realized I can't. I really can't. I really need to,
50-hour weeks are not sustainable for any length of time. And your heart wasn't in a lot of those hours of that made up the 50. So that's, that sort of thing for women to hear that, you can, at the age of 50, decide to, and it's scary to
oh yeah, my God.
It's, people make it sound as though it's not going, it's really, really simple, but as we were talking earlier, it's just that one step in front of the other, isn't it, to get where you are. So now you've got your own business.
Yeah, I have, and and I'm working in it full time now.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it was a really big decision to make. My head and heart were really in conflict before I really made the plunge. But my heart was, you've got to listen to your heart. And my heart was just, this is the work. Like, I get off a consult call with my, my clients, and I'm just like, oh, this is the work that makes my heart sing. I love it when I see the penny drop, or when I see that light bulb moment, and I see them making changes, and the help that I'm able to give them. There's nothing better than being in service of other people. When you've got the knowledge to be able to help them and share that knowledge with them. It really, really lights me up. And I'm so glad now that I've done it. But my God, it was a very hard decision. It really was. About 3 months of a little bit of turmoil there, and throwing, and in the end, it's just like, just do it. Really, if it doesn't work out,
it becomes a no-brainer, doesn't it? So it doesn't matter if it's a career change, a relationship change, or location change. There's a lot of wrestling that you go on in your head before something happens, but there's often follow the breadcrumbs as well.
Yeah,
isn't
that's
it?
right.
Yeah, so your breadcrumbs started at a younger age, so leading you to where you are now.
That's right, and that's what I think about. And as you said, it has been one step after the other, and particularly with making the decision to leave my school job, I had put too much work into the business to not do it, not to continue with it. I just thought, no, I've got to give it a good crack now. I've got to see where this can go. And I just think our generation of women are screaming for help, and we're here to help them. We're the ones stepping up. So
that's it.
Do it.
Well, congratulations. I'm very proud that you've done that for yourself and for your family, because what great role models you become for your own children to be able to see mum doing something like this as well.
Yeah, and my kids have never really seen me they've always seen me studying. Like when I was at TAFE, doing that course at TAFE, and then when I was doing my postgrad degree, I remember one day actually my older daughter came into me. She was in high school, and she said to me, "Mum, why do you do this to yourself? because, you know, she was at that teenage year, like not wanting to do homework. And
Yeah.
I said, because I want to do it, you know, I'm determined, and this is something that I really want to do. I want to learn more about this. And, you know, I was never really great at school. I've worked really hard to learn what I've learned and to be where I am now. Like I wasn't the brightest kid in class, but that determined, I hope if anything for my kids, yes, I've shown them that you can do anything at any age, because I'm a big believer in that. And I think I pretty much live that. But also, it doesn't matter what it is. If you've got that determination and the passion and the drive, you can do it.
Yeah.
It's got to be persistent with it.
And it's listening to that little voice, isn't it?
Yeah,
that little voice knew, that intuition that you had knew, and it's got you to where you are now.
Yeah.
Well, we'll look forward, Megan. We'll wrap up now. Before we finish, though, if you could look into the future, what do you hope that 80-year-old Megan is going to say about current day Megan?
Oh, I think definitely she'll be glad that she made the decisions that she did. Hopefully I've left a legacy of some sort for the women that are coming up behind me in menopause. I can definitely see that now with my own kids, because I talk about it quite openly with them, and it's starting to, you know, instigate a lot of conversations with their friends, and they're 20 and 22. So, you know, I'm hoping that, that would be the case. At 80, I'm really hoping that I'm going to be still strong and healthy like I am now. Like that's what I advocate for. That's really what the basis of my work, the self-care. I think if anything, should be just say, I'm just so glad you did what you did and you made the decisions that you made. Good on you.
Brilliant. Well, she might be working with 80-year-old women back in, you know, when you're 80, still working, helping others.
Yeah, I might be. You know, I don't actually see an end point. I really don't see an end point, because I think if I'm enjoying it, I'll continue.
Excellent. That's really good to hear. Well, I'm glad we've ended on that lovely positive note. Thanks so much for your time today, Megan. And I look forward to seeing all of your work that you do. So I'll put all of your information in the show notes, as I said earlier, so people can, if they want to contact you, they'll know where to go. Thanks so much. It's been lovely to talk to you today.
Thank you, Jo. I've been so happy to be here with you today. Thanks so much.
Pleasure. Thanks for listening to this episode. It's all too easy to get caught up in a negative mindset and downward spiral if all you see and hear are the negatives and doom and gloom about aging. And there's no doubt that this stage of life can be challenging, yet if all you focus on are the negatives, that's exactly what your experience will be. You don't have to settle for a life that doesn't light you up. You can actually create a life that you're in love with, and it's never too late. So much can change in a year, and I know this because I've been there and experienced it myself. So if you are ready to take that next step, I would love to invite you to Reimagine, my 4-week group mentoring program. We start on the 20th of April, and I'm welcoming women into the program now. The energy and the conversations and support are going to be next level. So if you're wanting to step into that next half of life, feeling inspired and excited, then this program is exactly for you. You're going to be able to get weekly mentoring to get the clarity to see what's possible. You'll be around other high vibe women, and you'll get the support, resources and steps to design your new future. And you soon find that when you surround yourself with other high vibe women who are ready and excited for the future, then your energy and the way you view your future will change. To join Reimagine, head to joclarkcoaching.com, email me at jo@joclarkcoaching.com, or send me a DM on socials to get all the information. And I can't wait for you to join and see what's possible ahead.